Next up, a sorely needed break from the present day, a new book offering a trip back in time to the Boston of yesteryear through more than 600 posters, ads, and flyers from the famed businesses, bands, bars, and more that made the city thrive through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The book is Buy Me Boston, Volume 2, compiled by local journalist and historian Brian Coleman. He's also the founder of the Good Road Media Company, and he joins me now. Hey, Brian.
Hello, it's great to be with you again.
It's really fun to be talking with you about this. We talked a couple years ago about Volume 1. What is it that made you do a second volume of this stuff?
I guess the easiest way to answer that is I just had so much that was kind of on the proverbial cutting room floor. So I just felt like if I didn't think that what I had sitting in the files was good enough, I wouldn't have attempted it. I mean, doing a volume 2 is actually kind of interesting because it's a different kind of pressure. The first volume, I wasn't under any real pressure at all because no one really knew what to expect, and I didn't know what to expect either. So I guess it was a good pressure to have, and along the way, I was just basically like, all right, so is this better, or at least as good as Volume 1, and hopefully better? So I think I accomplished that. I put even more stuff in, and it was just as fun this time around, too.
I would say, having read both, I feel like this one is just as good as the original, which I completely enjoyed, although I might have confessed this to you the last time we talked. If I didn't, I'll confess it here now. When I first saw Volume 1, I thought, well, what the heck is this about? This is just a bunch of old ads from newspapers, and then you read through it, and it functions as we said, a de facto time machine. And the more you get this insight into the way people lived and thought in the past. Let's jump into some of the images in Volume 2 to hopefully give people a sense of what I'm rambling on about there. The first image that we have, which you and I both picked as one of our top 10 favorites, is a Yellow Pages ad. I think it's the People's Yellow Pages from 1972, which happens to be the year I was born. And what I loved about this is that it embodies all the things that people were looking for sort of hippie-ish alternatives to. Schools, childcare, auto repair, legal aid, liberation, big topic. It conveys for me, as someone who, again, was born in that year, something of what it felt like to be looking at the counterculture to provide all the answers for you. Why did you like this image?
Well, I mean, I have a deeper story with that. After finding, it was kind of, these rabbit holes happened to me pretty much constantly. So I was actually looking for regular Yellow Pages for Boston on eBay. And then this thing popped up, the People's Yellow Pages. And I was like, what is that? What does that even mean? And then I got it, and I kind of understood that it's basically, it's a Yellow Pages for people who didn't want to buy stuff from the man.
Yep.
So it was a countercultural directory that would be print shops, for instance, if you were an anti-war kind of activist organization, there were print shops in Cambridge or Watertown or something that were kind of sympathetic and would give you a discount and things like that. And then I've really gone down a whole rabbit hole. I've met the people who did it originally, and it's just an incredible Cambridge story. And so that's why I love it.
A very different Cambridge, too, we should say. Okay, let's try to move fast. I want to talk for about 5 minutes about each of these. Your next favorite, we haven't got to, is a AAA recordings ad, which actually I thought about putting in my top 10, too. What do you like about this? Well,
I mean, obviously, visually, it's absolutely incredible. That recording studio in Dorchester was actually a very important one for the quote-unquote garage rock scene in the 60s and early 70s. A lot of groups recorded there. And finally, it was done by this guy, Ron Campisi, who was actually in the group the Rockin' Ramrods, who were one of the most known groups in the 60s in that garage scene. So kind of a win-win-win.
All right, my next favorite is a picture from a flyer from an appearance by Martin Luther King Jr. in Cambridge at First Baptist Church in Central Square. What I loved about this is just the way that it drives home in a real tangible, concrete, physical way that King was an actual human historical actor here in the Boston area, as opposed to a figure sort of from the mists of history, who we honor but don't think of as being intimately related to our world. Obviously, there's a push here in Boston to ramp up local acknowledgement of his roots here in Boston, but there's a lot still to be done on that front. So that's why that's my pick. You have an ad for Mr. Butch. Can you tell people who may not be familiar with Mr. Butch who he was?
Mr. Butch was the king of Kenmore Square, just like it says there. He was a local homeless guy who was just around. If you were in Kenmore, his home base was really the Rat in Kenmore Square. And anyone who walked through Kenmore in the late 70s through the 90s, Butch was there. Super friendly guy, very tall, imposing figure, but a real kind of sweet person. And he was like part of the scene. And so everybody, that's a perfect example. It's just like, if you see that picture, you just bring a smile to your face.
All right, I have to give a warning before this next favorite image of mine. People at home may be freaked out by what they're about to see. I showed it to my kids, and I think they were deeply unsettled. It's a YWCA ad, the Cambridge YWCA, with three people who look to me like they're straight out of a horror movie. I don't understand why anyone would have thought it would be advantageous to depict humans going to the YWCA this way in an ad for the YWCA. But I guess the late 60s and early 70s were a very different time. Your next one, a picture for the Open Arts Festival. Why do you like this?
This is an early Massachusetts Rock Against Racism event that happened in Jamaica Plain, 1981. The organization was founded in 79. A lot of those people, Mackie McLeod is on there, one of the MCs. He passed away. He was an amazing guy, local activist. Jose Masso is still around doing a lot of incredible work. So it's just a perfect example of what JP and what the kind of arts scene was like in the early 80s.
My next one is a picture of an ad for the Mass Pike, basically telling people, take the Mass Pike. They wanted people to take it to Red Sox games, said it was the fastest and safest way. What I love about this is that it seems to reflect a total sea change in the way people think about automotive travel. We all know the Pike is awful. No offense to the people who try to make it workable. It's not fast. It's not particularly pleasant. Here was a time where people thought about it totally differently. Your next one, an ad for James Brown.
This was not only James Brown, but if you know anything about the Sugar Shack, it was not a large club. And so James Brown playing at the Sugar Shack, which was down near the transportation building off the Common, this would have been one of the greatest shows you can ever imagine seeing in Boston. Also, very quickly, it was one of the two ticketed events at the Sugar Shack ever, which I learned that just about a week ago. So that and Ray Charles, that was it.
All right, I think we have time for two, maybe three more. My next fave, and again, sort of a creepy way, is an ad for something called the Regency. I don't know what the Regency is or was, but you could go there to take a shower with a friend. Again, something that you would never, ever see today, a completely different way to think. I've never thought about going out to take a shower with a friend. Maybe it's just me. Shows, again, how different habits were at a certain point in time. You've got an ad for Bob Marley as your next favorite.
Yeah, these are two the earliest Bob Marley performances in Boston. You can see the first one was from '73. Doesn't even mention his name. You know, people think Bob Marley's superstar, but he started out as a guy in a group and eventually ruled the world, in the reggae world. So that's just kind of an interesting snapshot. Also, Paul's Mall, very important venue down on Boylston Street.
Let me ask you super quickly, would you think about doing another volume looking at a different era? Or is this the era that you're going to be doing this kind of work about? Just really quickly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. I would like to read it, and I would urge anyone who enjoys what they saw, the full experience really requires sitting down with the book and spending a good half hour or hour with it. It is totally fascinating. Brian Coleman, thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
The book, again, is By Me Boston, Volume 2. And if you'd like to catch Coleman share some of the book's featured images and stories, he'll be doing 6 socially distant presentations at the Dorchester Art Project tomorrow and Saturday, with proceeds going to the nonprofit Brain Arts Organization. For tickets and more info, visit dorchesterartproject.com/events.